She did not say a word. That is the part I keep coming back to, even now, months later, when I tell people about the morning I stopped at the Kingsmere gate and watched a man in a red tunic do the one thing his whole life was built to forbid. She came out of the crowd the way a leaf comes off a tree in the first hard wind of autumn, without choosing it, without sound, simply carried. And she put her two thin hands flat against the cold gilded bars of the palace railing and stood there, and she looked up at the guard, and she did not say a word. I was 30 feet away, leaning on the low stone curb with a paper cup of coffee going cold in my hand. I had a train to catch in 40 minutes. I am a man who catches trains. I plan my mornings to the quarter hour, and I had planned this one to give me exactly 11 minutes at the gate of Caldermore Palace, because my late father used to bring me here when I was a boy, and once a year, on the morning of his birthday, I come back and stand where he stood and let myself remember him for the length of one cooling coffee. That was all this was supposed to be. 11 minutes, a memory, a train. Then the old woman touched the bars, and everything in me that runs on schedules went quiet. She was small, not frail in the way that makes you want to look away, but small in the way of someone who has spent 80 years folding herself smaller to take up less of the world. Gray hair pinned back under a green felt hat that had been good once, a long time ago. A wool coat buttoned wrong, one button off, so the whole front of it hung crooked, and I remember thinking even from 30 feet that she had not dressed herself crooked on purpose, that something had happened to her hands, or her morning, or her mind, and the crooked coat was the first plain sign of it. The guard stood his post 6 feet behind the railing on the raised stone of the forecourt. Red wool tunic, brass buttons catching the gray light, the tall black bearskin, white gloves, the rifle held at his shoulder in the parade rest they hold for hours without moving. His eyes were forward, fixed on the middle distance the way they are trained to fix, on nothing, on everything. He was a wall. He was supposed to be a wall. That is the whole point of him. And the old woman put her hands on his bars and looked up at his face with an expression I have only ever seen on the faces of the truly lost, not crying, not yet, but past crying, in that flat blank country on the other side of it, and her mouth opened, and nothing came out. A tourist near me laughed, not cruelly, just the nervous laugh of a man who does not know what he is looking at. She thinks he'll talk to her, he said to his wife, lifting his phone. They never move. Watch. I did not laugh. I was watching her hands. They were trembling against the gold bars, and they were empty. No handbag, no phone, no gloves of her own against the cold. And a woman of 80 does not stand at a palace gate at 8:30 in the morning with empty trembling hands, unless the morning has taken everything she came out of the house with. I should have gone to her. I will say that plainly because it is the truth, and the truth is the only thing worth telling about that morning. I, a grown man with 2 working legs and a warm coat and a coffee, stood 30 feet away and did nothing, because I am the kind of man who does not want to be the one who makes a scene, who tells himself someone official will handle it, who guards his 11 minutes. I stood there. The tourist filmed. His wife murmured. A pair of joggers went past without slowing. And the guard moved his eyes. I almost missed it. If I had not been staring at him the way you stare at a thing you expect to never change, I would have missed it entirely. But I saw it. His eyes, fixed forward for who knows how long, fixed forward as a matter of iron, came down. Just a fraction. Just enough to land on the small gray woman with her hands on his bars and her crooked coat and her open silent mouth. And something crossed his face. Not much. These men are made of restraint the way a bridge is made of steel. You do not see them bend. You only see, if you are looking, the single rivet that takes the strain. But I saw the rivet take it. I saw a young man behind a trained mask look down at an old woman in trouble and understand, in 1 second, exactly what kind of trouble it was. He did not break, not yet. A lesser telling would have him sweep her up in that instant, and that is not what happened, and the truth of what happened is better than the lie. What happened was that he held. He looked at her, and he held his post, and you could see the war of it in the set of his jaw, the decades of training that said you do not move, you do not speak. You are not here for this, and the other thing, the older thing, the human thing that said this is a grandmother, and she is lost and afraid, and she has come to you of all the people in this city, because the man in the red coat looks like the only solid thing left standing. She tried again. Her mouth worked. A sound came out this time, thin and cracked and wordless, the sound of a person reaching for speech and finding the shelf bare. And her knees did a thing I did not like, a small dip, a buckle caught and straightened, and her grip on the bars went white. That was when I finally moved. Shame is a slow engine, but it does start. I set my coffee on the curb and crossed the cobblestones toward her, and as I came I heard the tourist behind me say, in a different voice now, not laughing, "Is she all right? She doesn't look all right." I reached her at the same moment her legs gave the second time, and I caught her under one arm, and she weighed almost nothing, a coat full of birds, and up close I could see her eyes were wet after all, and her lips were gray-blue with cold, and she was shaking from more than fear. "I've got you," I said, the way you say a thing you hope is true. "I've got you. You're all right." She turned her face up to me and she got two words out. Two. They came up out of her like water out of deep stone, slow and with great cost. "Can't," she said, "home." That was all. Can't. Home. And then her eyes went past me back up to the man behind the bars in the red coat, as if he and not I were the one she had come all this way to reach, as if I were only the stranger who happened to be standing where she fell, and he were the one she had chosen. I looked up too, and I will tell you what I saw, because it is the reason I am writing any of this down at all. The guard had broken his stance. Not dramatically. He had not thrown down his rifle or vaulted the railing or shouted. He had done something far smaller and, I have come to think, far harder. He had brought the rifle down from his shoulder to the order, the butt to the cobble at his right foot, the weapon upright at his side, his free hand off the stock, and he had turned, a precise quarter turn on the heel, so that his body now faced the bars and the woman against them. His eyes were no longer fixed forward. They were on her. And his face, which a moment ago had been a mask, was now just the face of a young man looking at a problem he had decided to solve. A sentry box stood to his left, and beside it a second guard, older, with a sergeant's cording on his shoulder. I saw the sergeant's head come around at the sound of the rifle butt meeting stone, a small sound, but in that frozen geometry of discipline it was a gunshot. The sergeant's mouth opened. Whatever order was forming in it, the young guard did not wait for it. "Sergeant Vane," the young guard said, not loud but in the flat carrying tone of a man giving a report. "Woman in distress at the line. Elderly. She's going down. I need the gate." I have replayed those 4 sentences more times than I can count. There was no panic in them. There was no asking. He did not say asterisk may I, asterisk he did not say I think perhaps. He stated the situation as a soldier states a situation, and then he stated what the situation required, and the requiring of it was the whole of his request. I need the gate. He was asking to open the most famous closed thing in the city. The linemen have stood and died to hold, and he asked it the way you would ask for a clean bandage. The Sergeant Vane, a gray man with a face like a cliff, looked at the old woman, who was now more or less in my arms, her hat askew, her breath coming in those short, shallow sips that frighten you when you hear them. He looked at the tourist with the phone. He looked at the small crowd that was, I realized, beginning to gather, drawn by the strange stillness breaking. And I watched a different war happen on a second face. The war of a man whose entire career is the holding of a line, deciding in the space of 2 seconds whether this was the morning the line bent. "Stand fast," Vane said to the young guard. And for one cold instant, I thought he meant asterisk no. Then he turned and barked something through the open door of the sentry box, and a bell, not the great muster bell I have read they ring for sieges, but a smaller handbell, a summoning bell, rang twice, Sharp and Vane himself stepped to the small iron wicket gate set into the great railing, drew a key on a chain from inside his tunic, and opened it. "Bring her in off the street," Vane said to me, a stranger holding a stranger. "Both of you, off the street, move." I want to be honest about how strange it was to be spoken to like that, to be made, in one sentence, part of the operation. I had walked up to that gate a tourist, a man with a train, a man minding his 11 minutes. Now a sergeant of the King's Guard was holding a wicket open and ordering me through it with a frightened grandmother in my arms, and the young guard had come down off his stone and was reaching across to take her other side, his white glove closing gently. Gently, that is the word, there is no other, around the old woman's elbow. "I've got her, ma'am," he said to her, quiet, bent down to her height, which cannot have been easy in that bearskin which I am told weighs more than you would ever guess. "I've got you. You came to the right place. We're going to sort this out." And the old woman, who had not managed a sentence yet, looked from his young face under that towering black fur to the bars she had been clutching, and she said the third and fourth words I heard her say that morning. "They took it," she said. "All of it." We got her through the wicket and onto the cold stone of the forecourt, and sat her on the wooden bench inside the sentry box's small shelter, out of the wind, and the young guard knelt in front of her. A King's Guard, on one knee, on the cobbles of Caldermore Palace, in front of a crowd of phones, and I promise you not one person laughed now. And he took off his white gloves just like that, peeled them off finger by finger and tucked them into his belt. And he took the old woman's bare trembling hands between his own bare warm ones, and he held them. "Tell me your name," he said. "Alina," she said. The name came easier than the rest, the way our own names do, the last thing the cold and the fear let go of. "Alina Prewitt." "Mrs. Prewitt." "I'm going to call you Mrs. Prewitt if that's all right." A small nod from her. "Mrs. Prewitt, you said they took it. Can you tell me who and what they took?" It came out of her in pieces, the way these things do, and I will set it down in order, though it did not come in order. She had taken the early bus into the city. A thing she did once a month, she said, to put flowers on a grave. It was someone's birthday, she said, and at that I felt the floor of my own morning tilt, because I had come to this same gate on a birthday too, and the city is full of us, the people who keep dates with the dead. On the bus or at the stop or in the press of the morning crowd, she could not say where, a hand had been in her bag and then her bag had been gone. Purse, phone, her travel pass. The little folded paper with her daughter's number on it, because she could never keep the number in her head. 40 years in the same house and she could give you that address in her sleep, but the new number, her daughter's mobile, that lived only on the paper, and the paper lived only in the purse, and the purse was gone. "And I couldn't think where to go," she said. Her voice was steadying now, with the young guard's warm hands around her cold ones. "I couldn't think who. I haven't got a way to ring anyone. I haven't got my pass to get home." And I stood on the pavement and everyone was walking so fast, and I thought, I'll find a policeman, but I couldn't find a policeman, and then I saw the palace and I saw, she looked at him, and her chin crumpled and steadied again, "I saw you, standing so still, and I thought that one won't walk past me, that one stays." I had to look away for a moment when she said it. That one won't walk past me, that one stays. Because the whole city had walked past her, I had nearly walked past her, and the one figure in it who was forbidden by everything he was to so much as turn his head was the one she had read, correctly, as the only fixed and faithful thing on the street. She had not gone to the man who could move. She had gone to the man who would not. The young guard was very quiet for a moment. Then he looked up past her, past me, at Sergeant Vane, who stood with his arms folded and his cliff face giving nothing away, and the young guard said the thing that I think decided the rest of the morning. "Sergeant, she can't get home, and she's got no way to call anyone who can come for her. Permission to see this through." Permission to see this through. 6 words. I have built houses on smaller foundations. Sergeant Vane did not answer right away. He was, I understood later, a man with a great deal more to weigh than I could see. There is a protocol for everything at a place like that, a protocol for the changing of the watch, a protocol for medical emergencies, a protocol for unattended bags and for ill members of the public, and for who may and may not pass the wicket and under whose authority. A sentry is not free. That is the thing people forget when they stand and gawk at the still red figures. The stillness is not the absence of choices. The stillness is 1,000 choices made in advance, by other men in other rooms and handed down, and a guard who breaks from it had better be able to account for every inch of the break to officers who will ask him, later and coldly, exactly why. Vane knew all of that. The young guard knew all of that, and the young guard had knelt down and taken off his gloves anyway. "You're off your post," Vane said. It was not quite an accusation. It was a fact laid on the table between them, the first fact of the accounting that would come. "Yes, Sergeant." "You'll answer for it." "Yes, Sergeant, I will." The two of them looked at each other, and something passed between them that I did not have the rank to read, but that I have thought about often since, because Vane did not order the young man back to his stone. Vane unfolded his arms and crouched down himself, level with Mrs. Prewitt, and his cliff of a face did something I would not have believed it could do. It gentled. "Mrs. Prewitt," he said, "Alina, my name's Vane. I've a mother your age and she'd have my hide if I let a lady stand cold in the wind. So we're going to get you warm and we're going to get you home, and the king's household is going to do it, because that is exactly the sort of thing the king's household is for, whatever the tourists think. Now." He stood, and the gentleness went back behind the cliff, and he was all sergeant again. "Caro," and that, I learned, was the young guard's name. "Caro, you've started this. You'll finish it under my authority, on my account. Get her inside the lodge where it's warm. I'll signal the duty officer and the medical orderly. You," the gray eyes swung to me, "what's your part in this?" "Nothing," I said. "I was passing. I caught her when she fell." "You caught her when she fell," Vane repeated, and looked at me for a second longer than was comfortable, and I felt myself measured and, I think, found neither guilty nor especially impressive, which was about right. "Then you'll stay until we've got hold of her family in case she needs a familiar face, and you'll tell the duty officer what you saw, plain. A lady gets robbed in this city and falls at our gate. Somebody honest ought to be able to say how it went. Can you miss your morning?" I thought about the train. I thought about my 11 minutes, already long gone, and the cold coffee on the curb outside, and the 1,000 sensible reasons a man has for not getting involved. And I thought about that one won't walk past me, that one stays, and I heard myself say, "I can miss my morning." So I stayed, and that is how I came to be inside the guard lodge of Caldermore Palace on the morning of my father's birthday, watching the slow, careful, deeply unglamorous machinery of decent men trying to get an old woman home. It was not, I should say, a fairy tale. This is the part the phones did not film and the part nobody posts, but it is the part that mattered most, so I am going to tell it. Getting Mrs. Prewitt home was asterisk hard. The medical orderly came, a calm woman in a plain uniform, and checked her over and said she was chilled and shaken and a little dehydrated, but that her heart and her color were sound, and that she should have something warm and sweet and a sit-down before she went anywhere, and not before. So we sat. Somebody brought tea in a thick white mug, and Mrs. Prewitt held it in both hands like a small fire. Caro had gone back to his post. There was a changing of the watch, and he was relieved properly, and I saw him march off stiff and correct and not look back, and I confess I felt a small drop of disappointment, as if the story had lost its hero in the second act. But the household did not lose its hold on Mrs. Prewitt. That was the thing. Caro had started it, but Vane had taken it onto his account, and the account did not close just because one young man's watch had ended. The duty officer, a lieutenant with tired eyes and a notebook, came and sat with Mrs. Prewitt and asked her the gentle, slow questions you ask a frightened person. Where do you live? Who is your daughter? Is there anyone closer? When did you last eat? And wrote it all down, and the trouble, the real trouble, surfaced one piece at a time. She lived a long way out, not in the city at all, in a village an hour and a half by the slow line, a place with a name like a thing in an old hymn, and her house at the end of a lane past the church. She had no money for a ticket. It had all gone with the purse. Her daughter, Maggie, lived 2 hours the other way and worked shifts at a hospital and could not always answer her phone, and in any case Mrs. Pruitt could not give us the number. It had been on the paper, in the purse. She knew her own address by heart, the 40 years address, but she could not for the life of her summon her daughter's mobile, and when the lieutenant gently suggested the landline, Mrs. Pruitt's face crumpled again, and she said Maggie had given the landline up 2 years ago. Everyone had. It was all mobiles now, and she had written the mobile on the paper so she would not lose it. And now the paper was lost, and she said the word asterisk lost in a way that I do not think was only about the paper. "All right," the lieutenant said, unbothered, writing. "We'll find Maggie. People are findable. What's Maggie's surname and what hospital?" And Mrs. Pruitt told him the hospital, and a first name, and a maiden name and a married name she was not sure was still the married name, because there had been a divorce, she thought, or perhaps only a separation. She got confused, and the lieutenant wrote it all down without a flicker, and I sat there and watched a careful man build a rope out of frayed threads, and I understood that the breaking of protocol at the gate had not been the hard part at all. The hard part was this. The hard part is always this, the long unphotographed middle, where good intentions meet a real morning and have to do the actual, tedious, stubborn work of helping. It took the better part of 2 hours. I will not pretend I sat saintly through all of it. Somewhere in the second hour I stepped out to telephone my own office and tell them I would not be in, and a part of me, the train-catching part, the part I am not proud of, was already composing the slightly impressive story I would tell. But every time I came back into that warm lodge and saw Mrs. Pruitt's small hands around the cooling mug, and the lieutenant on the lodge telephone working his way patiently up a chain of hospital switchboards, the impressive story went quiet in me, and something steadier took its place. And then, just past 11, the lieutenant put down the telephone and turned around, and his tired eyes had something new in them. "Mrs. Pruitt," he said, "I've got Maggie." The old woman's whole face moved at once, the way a sky moves when the cloud finally clears off the sun. "You spoke to her. She's all right, is she?" "She's well. She's at work on a ward and she's worried sick about you. She's been trying your phone since 9 and getting nothing, and she said she nearly left her shift to drive to your house. She sends her love, and she said," the lieutenant glanced at his notebook, and a small dry smile touched the corner of his mouth, "she said, and I'm to quote it, 'Tell Mum to stop wandering off and frightening people.'" Mrs. Pruitt laughed. It was the first laugh I had heard out of her, a watery, cracked little thing, and it did more to put the color back in her face than the tea had. "That's my Maggie," she said. "That's her exactly." But the lieutenant's face, when the smile faded, told me there was more, and the more was not all good. He sat back down across from her and laid it out plainly, the way the whole household seemed to lay things out, no false comfort, no hiding the hard edge. The problem was this. Maggie was 2 hours away. In the middle of a hospital shift she could not simply abandon. There were patients. There was no one to cover her, and she could not get free until late evening at the earliest. She had offered, the lieutenant said, to send money for a taxi, but a taxi all the way out to the village would cost the earth, and Maggie did not have the earth. And besides, the lieutenant said, putting a frightened, robbed, chilled 83-year-old woman alone into a stranger's car for a 90-minute drive into the dark countryside was not something he was willing to call asterisk safe, and he would not pretend otherwise. The trains ran out to the village, but the through service had stopped for the day. The only way now was the slow line with 2 changes, and Mrs. Pruitt with no money, no pass, no phone, no way to call for help if she missed a connection or got turned around alone. In the early dark, making 2 changes on the slow line was, the lieutenant said, a thing he could arrange but would not be easy in his conscience to allow. So, he said and spread his hands, we'll work out the right thing. I'd not have you sit here all day either. Let me make some calls. And that, I thought, was where the king's household would reasonably stop. They had done a great deal. They had taken her in off the cold street, warmed her, fed her, found her family, established that she was sound. Any reasonable account of the morning would call that a job more than well done. The rest, the 90 minutes into the countryside, the 2 changes on the slow line, the lane past the church in the dark, that was beyond any duty you could name. That was the part where someone signs a form and orders a taxi and washes their hands with a clear conscience. I had reckoned without Caro. He came back into the lodge a little before noon, and he was not in the red tunic anymore. He was in plain clothes, a dark jacket, an open collar, the bearskin and the rifle and the brass all put away. And out of the uniform he was younger than I had thought, 25 maybe, with a soldier's short hair and a soldier's straight back and a face that, off-duty, could not hide what it was feeling at all. He came in and he found Mrs. Prewitt, and he crouched down by her bench the way he had at the gate, and he said, "Mrs. Prewitt, they tell me we've got hold of your Maggie. I'm glad." "You're the one," she said, peering at him. Without the towering bearskin she did not recognize him at first, and then she did all at once. "You're the one from the gate. The one who stayed." "Caro, ma'am, Daniel Caro. My watch is done for the day." He glanced up at the lieutenant and then at Vane, who had come in behind him, and I realized that the 3 of them had already had a conversation I had not been part of, because what Caro said next he said like a man delivering a decision, not floating an idea. "Sir, Sergeant, I'm off duty and my own time's my own. I'd like to see Mrs. Prewitt home. Properly, door to door. I know the slow line. I grew up 2 villages over from hers as it happens, and I'd not be easy leaving her to make those changes alone in the dark." There was a silence in the lodge. The lieutenant looked at him for a long moment. "You understand," he said slowly, "that the moment you walk her out that gate you're not a King's Guard doing this. You're a private citizen on his own time. The household's part ends at the gate. If you take this on, you take it on as Daniel Caro and on your own head." "Yes, sir, I understand that." "It's your only day off this week." "Yes, sir." "You'll be getting back on midnight, with work in the morning." "Yes, sir, I've done worse on less." And here Sergeant Vane spoke, and what he said I have never forgotten. "Lieutenant," he said, "with respect, let the lad go. We stood that boy at the gate to be the thing the public believes the household is, brave, steady. The one who won't walk past, he believed it. Now he wants to be it on his own time and his own coin. If we tell him no, what exactly are we teaching him the gate is asterisk for?" He looked at Caro. "Go, see her home, and Caro, you do it right. You don't leave her at a station thinking that's good enough. Lane, church, front door, key in the lock, lights on, kettle on, all the way." "All the way, Sergeant," Caro said. Mrs. Prewitt was looking between them with her mouth a little open, and at last she said, "But I haven't any money. I can't pay for tickets. I can't pay for asterisk anything. That's the whole. That's what I've been trying to," and her composure, which had held through all of it, began to go again. "Because there is a particular shame in being old and robbed and unable to pay your own way," and she felt it keenly. "You'll pay me back with a cup of tea when we get to your kitchen," Caro said. "That's my fee. 1 cup of tea in your own kitchen when you're home safe. Is it a deal?" She looked at him. "That's no fee at all." "It's the only one I'm charging." He stood and held out his arm to her, bent at the elbow, formal as a man at a dance. "Shall we, Mrs. Prewitt? We've a slow line to catch and a long way to go, and I mean to have you home before the news." And then he turned to me, this young man, and he said, and I had not expected to be addressed, "I had thought my part was over, sir. You caught her when she fell. You stayed when you could have gone. Would you ride with us as far as the city changes? I think she'd like a second steady face, and the company would do us both good." I looked at my watch. The train I had planned to catch was 4 hours gone. There would be others. There are always others. There is only ever one of certain mornings, though, and I knew, standing in that warm lodge with the cold coffee long abandoned on a curb outside, that this was one of them. "I'll ride as far as you need me," I said. So the three of us went out through the great gate of Caldermore Palace, out, this time, not stopped at the bars but passing freely through the wicket vein held open one last time, and into the gray afternoon, an old woman on the arm of a young man in a dark jacket, and a stranger with a long-abandoned coffee somewhere behind him on a curb. The crowd at the railing had thinned. A few still filmed. Caro paid them no mind at all. Out of the red coat, he was just a young man walking carefully so that an elderly woman could match his pace. And there is nothing on this earth a phone wants less than that. The journey home was the whole rest of that day, and it was made of small things, and I have come to believe the small things were the point. Caro paid for the tickets at the city station out of his own pocket, counting the coins and notes the way a young man on a soldier's wage counts them, and waving off my offer to split it with a firmness that did not leave room to argue. "She's not your charge, sir," he said. "She came to my gate." He said it without a scrap of pride, as a plain matter of whose job a thing was, and I let it go, though I confess I slipped the price of 3 teas into Mrs. Prewitt's coat pocket when she wasn't looking, for later, because a man has to do something. On the first train, Mrs. Prewitt began to talk, properly talk, now that she was warm and safe and moving in the right direction. She told us about the village, and the lane, and the church, and the house at the end of it where she had lived for 41 years. She told us about her late husband, Tom, a railwayman, which made her laugh again, and here I am stranded by the trains. He'd never let me hear the end of it. And she told us at last about the grave and the birthday, and the lodge and the gate, and the whole strange day arranged itself around what she said next. The grave was her son's, not her husband's. Her husband was buried out at the village near the house where she could visit any day she liked. The grave in the city was her son's, her boy who had been gone a long time now, more than 30 years, taken young by an illness with a long name when he was barely grown, and it was his birthday, the city birthday, the one she made the long bus journey for once a month, and especially on the day. She brought him flowers. She had brought them this morning. They had been in the bag, with the purse, with everything, and the thief had taken the flowers too, or thrown them in a gutter, she supposed. And that, she said quietly, looking out the train window at the gray going by, was the part that had finally undone her on the pavement. Not the money, not even the fear, the flowers. She had carried flowers across a city for her boy for 30 years, and this was the first year she had not laid them down, and she had stood there on the cold pavement with empty hands and thought, "I've failed him. I couldn't even do this one thing." And it was then, she said, that the morning had gone white and silent, and she had drifted toward the only fixed thing on the street, the man in the red coat who would not walk away. Caro was quiet for a while after that. Then he said, "We'll go back, Mrs. Prewitt. You and I next month on a day off. I'll meet you off the bus and we'll take him his flowers together, and you'll not carry them across the city alone again. If you'll have me." She put her small hand over his on the train table and did not say anything at all, and did not need to. It was full dark by the time we reached the village. I had stayed on past the city changes, past the place where I had said I would turn back, because by then turning back was unthinkable. The slow line did its slow work. We made the 2 changes. A connection we nearly missed was held for us by a guard on the platform whom Caro knew somehow, the railway being a smaller world than the city is. And at last the little train let us off at a halt with 1 lamp and the smell of cold fields. And there was the church Mrs. Prewitt had spoken of, its tower black against the last gray in the sky, and there was the lane. We walked her down it. The lane was unlit and rutted, and Caro took her arm on the rough ground, and I went ahead with the torch on my phone, lighting the puddles, and behind me I could hear the old woman naming things in the dark. That's the Hartley's gate. They'll have my milk in for me. They always do. That's where the big sycamore came down in the storm of, years ago now. And the naming of them was the sound of a person coming back into her own life, picking it up piece by piece where she had dropped it that morning at the bus stop in the city. Her house was at the very end, a low stone cottage with a green door, and a neighbor's light came on as we approached. The Hartleys, it turned out, who had indeed taken in her milk and who had been fretting since the afternoon when Maggie, unable to reach anyone else, had rung the only village number she had and asked them to watch for her mother. So there were warm hands at the green door too, and questions, and Caro stood back and let the village fold its own around her, and only stepped forward when there was the small matter of the key. Because the key, of course, had been in the purse. For a moment I felt the whole long day teeter on that one small cold fact. We had brought her 90 minutes through 2 changes and a dark lane, and she could not get into her own house. But Mrs. Pruitt only smiled and reached up, and felt along the top of the door frame with her trembling fingers, and brought down a second key gone orange with rust, and said, "Tom always said keep a spare where the burglars are too proud to look, and put it in the lock," and the green door opened on the dark, warm-smelling inside of a home, and she was in. Caro did exactly what Vane had told him to do. He did not leave her at the door thinking that was good enough. He went in. He found the light switch she pointed him to, and the lamps came on, and the little front room appeared, a worn chair by a cold grate, a wall of photographs, and there I saw, on the mantel in the place of honor, a young man's face in a frame, smiling out of 30 years ago. Caro lit the fire that was laid ready in the grate. He filled the kettle from the tap and set it on the stove. He drew the curtains against the dark and the cold. The Hartleys brought in bread and eggs and a pint of milk, and rang Maggie to say her mother was home, safe, warm in her own chair, and I heard, faintly down the line, a daughter 2 hours away begin to cry with relief. And then Mrs. Pruitt made the tea. She would not be sat down for it. It was her kitchen and her kettle and her 1 fee to pay, and she paid it. She made tea for the Hartleys and for me, and last and most carefully for Daniel Caro, in a good cup, the one with the gold rim, and she put it into his hands the way he had put his warm hands around her cold ones at the gate that morning, a long time ago and 100 miles south, and she said, "There, paid in full." Caro drank his tea standing by the fire he had lit in the lamplight under the photograph of her son, and he did not say much, and he did not need to. When the cup was empty he set it down, and he said his goodbyes, and he checked once more that the doors were locked and the fire was safe, and the number for Maggie, written fresh and large on a card by the Hartleys and propped against the clock, was where she could find it. He took nothing. He let her thank him and did not deflect it the way young men do. He just stood and received it because he understood, I think, that letting her thank him was itself a kindness, the last one of the day, the return of a little of the dignity the morning had stolen along with the purse. We caught the last train back together, Caro and I, 2 men in a cold, empty carriage rattling south through the dark. I asked him, somewhere in that long ride, whether he would be in trouble for coming off his post, for the rifle butt on the stone, for the gate opened, for the account Vane had taken onto himself. He thought about it. "There'll be questions," he said. "There always are." I broke the form of the thing. Then he looked out at the dark fields going by, and he said the line I carried home with me and carry still. "But the form of the thing isn't the thing. We stand at that gate so people believe somebody steady is still there, holding." She believed it. I'd rather answer for proving her right than stand spotless all day and prove her wrong. I have caught a great many trains since that morning. I plan my mornings to the quarter hour still. Some men don't change. But once a year, on my father's birthday, I go back and stand at the Kingsmere gate of Caldermore Palace, and I watch the still red figures who are forbidden to move, and I think about how stillness is not the same as indifference, how the steadiest thing on a whole cold street can also be the kindest, And I remember an old woman with empty, trembling hands who looked up and down a city full of people who could move, and chose, correctly, the one man who would not walk past her. And every year, before I leave to catch my train, I lay a few flowers at the foot of the railing, where the man in the red coat can see them, for a son I never met, and a grandmother who got home, and a young guard who understood that the gate was never the wall. It was the promise that someone behind it would always, always stay.